Chapter 24 seems really boring at first until you break it down a little bit. All right. I'm going to try to keep it fairly simple. Again, if we were in person, I'd have a lot more to say about this, but you are about done with this book. You've got 2 class days left, and let's just put you out of your misery as much as possible, right? So let's get through chapter 24. This is all about the Ladies Missionary Circle. And this is all supposed to point out about hypocrites. Okay. So you have points out hypocrites, and it points out how cruel people, especially women, can be to one another. And, Scout doesn't want to be a woman. And if this is what she sees going on around her, no wonder. Our time's so different from the 1930s in this sense, I would say no. Women can be so cruel to one another. Teenage girls, y'all can be mean, just downright mean. And sometimes women don't grow out of that. Okay. So our first case of this is Miss Stephanie. She mocks Scout. Basically, the Ladies Missionary Circle is these ladies that get together to talk about what they are doing in the missionary field, how they're supporting people, how they are bringing the Word of God, and having like a meeting about it. Okay, so all the women are there. Starts off with Miss Stephanie mocking Scout. She's like, "Oh, what you want to be when you grow up? A lawyer? Because, you already been going to court." Like, she's pointing out and calling her out in front of all these other grown-ups about the fact that she was at the trial of Tom Robinson. And she does it just to get a laugh. And that's wrong. Any adult who makes fun of a child so that they can make themselves feel funny, or even makes fun of anyone else so that they look funny themselves, that's just downright rude. But especially when it's a child. Like, you don't make fun of children. I don't know what, to make yourself as an adult feel better. Oh, don't get me started. Then there's Miss Merriweather. Mrs. Merriweather is the most devout woman in all of Macomb County, which means she's the best Christian around. Okay? If there is somebody to look up to for being the best Christian, it is Mrs. Merriweather. However, I want to present to you that she's more of a hypocrite than she is the kind of Christian woman that I want to look up to. So she talks about how they help the poor oppressed Marooners, and these are an African people, and she talks about, how they live in sin and squalor. And, is it great? Is it a Christian characteristic? Is it, something to aspire to as a Christian to help people who are poor and oppressed? Yes. In different countries? Of course. In your own country? Yeah. How about in your own town? Definitely. However, I want to point out to you that Mrs. Merriweather doesn't do anything about the people in her own town. Okay? So she's in charge of this group, and, I'd like to point out to you how easy it is to be a good Christian and to support other people in other places who are doing things. And sometimes when it comes down to doing the dirty work ourselves, we're not so good about that. When we are called to go out and actually serve food or meals or talk to or spend time with someone who is apparently homeless in Bronson Park, we don't do that. And that's, I think, is sad. Okay? I just want to put that out there. And I hope that looking at Mrs. Merriweather makes you look at yourselves, your churches, how you feel about doing mission work right here at home, doing it in Kalamazoo, because there's a lot of people you learned through your nonprofit organizations. There's a lot of people who need your help just in your communities. And there's so much that you can do to help people without ever leaving your city even. However, Mrs. Merriweather, the leader of this whole thing, she's talking about, she's on page 231, and she was talking to Scout first, and then she says, what's that, Gertrude? And she's like, oh, you know what I say, Forgive and forget. We just need to let them know that we forgive them and that we've forgotten it, and this whole thing will blow over. And Scout says, what'll blow over? And she talks about, oh, let me get to the right page so I can get you the right words. But essentially, she's talking about the whole Tom Robinson case. And she's going to go on to talk about how the people, how the darkies are so discontent, and they're all riled up and all this kind of stuff. And it's really, really racist. It's really prejudiced. It's really giving the face to the fact that they don't value these people, their feelings at all. Tom Robinson is wrongly convicted. The proof showed that he did not rape or beat Mayella Ewell, that her father is the one that beat her, and that he is most likely the father of the children that they call her brothers and sisters. This has been exposed to the whole town. And yet they're not doing anything about that. And instead, the things that they say are all about how, oh, you can educate them till you're blue in the face, but no lady's safe in her bed these days from them, meaning the black people. Oh yeah, the black people are just going to come in and rape all kinds of women in their beds at night. They're not safe. Well, you know what? Tom Robinson didn't do it. So what are you basing your statements on, lady? She doesn't take into account the feelings of these people. Do you really think that if Tom Robinson was your father, your husband, would you just let it blow over? And we forgive them and we're forgetting about it. Forgive them, the black people, for what? They didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing to forgive them for. So just, really just not acknowledging that these are people who have legitimately hurt feelings and who have been legitimately wronged. On page 232, now we're going to get into not only is she racist and prejudiced, but now we're going to get into her talking smack about people. I'm sorry, but good Christian people love one another, encourage one another, build up one another. They don't criticize. They don't say rude things. They don't judge. However, Mrs. Merriweather's doing all of that, and she's doing it sitting in Atticus's house. This is what she says. On page 232, she says, I tell you, there are some good but misguided people in this town. Good but misguided. Folks in this town who think they're doing right. I mean, now far be it from me to say who. I'm sorry, but that's a sign of a coward. If you're going to talk about somebody, go ahead and use their name. And my rule is if you can't say it in front of that person, then you shouldn't be saying it about that person. Now, far be it from me to say who, but some of them in this town thought they were doing the right thing a while back, but all they did was stir 'em up. That's all they did. Might have looked like the right thing to do at the time. I'm sure, I don't know. I'm not read in that field, but sulky, dissatisfied. And then she goes on to talk about her cook, Sophie, who she had to tell her to stop moping around because Jesus never complained. There are just so many things on so many levels that make me angry about this woman that I just want to smack her, which I'm sorry, that's not a very good Christian characteristic either, and I won't actually do it, mostly because Mrs. Merriweather is a fictional character. But it's just the whole point that she calls herself a Christian, and yet she's talking about Atticus like this. She doesn't have the nerve to call him out and say, what Atticus did wasn't right. I don't think that he was doing the right thing. She doesn't call it out like that and own it as her own opinion. She just, some people in this town thought they were doing the right thing, but Not only is she too much of a coward to say her statement as her own and that it is about Atticus, but she's doing it in his house, in front of his child. You don't talk bad about somebody in front of their kid and in front of his own sister. And she sees nothing wrong with this? Auntie Alexandra is just like, what do I do? Scout is like, what's she talking about? She's a little clueless still. But Miss Maudie, who is somebody, a woman who is ahead of her time, who speaks out, who is vocal, who puts people in their place, who is the voice of reason through this book, Miss Maudie says, his food don't stick going down, does it? And this is a weird thing, the food not sticking going down doesn't make sense to us. It's not much of a, ooh, diss. But what she's doing is calling her out. Really? You're going to sit here and talk about him and eat his food with his family, in front of his child, in his own house? You're going to criticize him? Are you really doing that? And she calls her out. And Mrs. Merriweather is, oh, Maudie, I'm sure I don't know what you mean. I'm sure you do, Miss Maudie said shortly. She said no more. Miss Maudie, when Miss Maudie was angry, her brevity was icy. Something had made her deeply angry, and her gray eyes were as cold as her voice. Mrs. Merriweather reddened, glanced at me, and looked away. She just got put in her place. Okay. Shortly after that, Atticus, they start talking about hypocrites, which is, really something, because I think that Mrs. Merriweather is a great example of a hypocrite, talking about how you're working to bring the word of God to the poor and oppressed. Oh, and that was the other thing. When she said something about from here on out, we need to teach her to help them lead a Christian life from here on out. And Scout's like, are y'all talking about Miss Mayella? Like, Scout realizes that Mayella needs that. Mayella needs help from the church, from the community, on how to raise these kids, how to teach them, to teach them and how to raise them to be Christians, because she's not getting any help. Like, she needs help to be removed from her father. And when she says, oh, are y'all talking about Miss Mayella? An 8-year-old child realizes that Mayella needs that kind of help. Mrs. Merriweather's response is, oh, no, not her. That darkie's wife, Tom's wife. But you know what? Tom's wife was already leading a Christian life. They were already attending church. They were already bringing up their children in the ways of the Lord. They were already being supported by their church and community. The person who really needs that help is Mayella. But Mrs. Merriweather dismisses her. And I'd like to point out to you that, they know this is going on. I'm positive that they have seen Mayella probably pregnant when they've taken out a church basket at Christmas time, at Thanksgiving, when they have taken their trees to the town dump, when the truant lady has gone to get the kids and forced them to come to school. Don't you think she goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Next year she comes out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Couple years later, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kids here? Like, there's no mama. There's no wife. Where are these kids coming from? Everyone knows what's going on out there, but nobody wants to get involved. And unfortunately, that's what we are a lot of times. We're safe Christians. We'll get involved if it's safe. We'll donate some money. We'll drop it in a bucket. But do we go out and get involved where it's really needed? Where you might get your hands dirty, where things are a little ugly. Not these ladies. Not Mrs. Merriweather, even though she's the most devout woman in all of Maycomb. I don't have any respect for her. So Atticus comes home and he says, Aunt Alexandra, can I talk to you in the kitchen? She goes in there, Miss Maudie goes in there, Scout goes in there, Calpurnia's in there, and Atticus tells them Tom's dead. He tried to escape. The guard shot him 17 times. Do you really think that they needed to shoot a one-armed man 17 times? Or did they go a little crazy on him? Okay. And I wonder if he was white, a hardened criminal, murderer, white man, would they have shot him 17 times? Or would they have shot him 2, maybe 3 times? Do they shoot Tom Robinson 17 times because they need to in order to stop him? Or do they shoot him because he's black? Those are some tough questions. Aunt Alexandra is very upset. She says, when will it stop? What does this town want from him? She's upset about Atticus. She's upset about the effect that this is having on him. And Miss Maudie makes a great quote when she says, have you ever stopped to think that we're paying him the highest tribute we can pay a man? We trust him to do what's right. And Alexandra's like, who? And Maudie says, the handful of people in this town that want fair justice. The handful of people in this town that realize that the good life is not just for whites. The people in this town who have background. Okay? And then they say, we better get back out there, like they're going to miss us. We've been gone a long time. And so they go back out to host this party, and Scout talks about how could Aunt Alexandra, after being so upset, and Miss Maudie, after just learning this awful news, how could they go back in there and chit-chat and be good hostesses and whatever? And Aunt Alexandra nods at her, like, look at the cookies, take them. And so she picks them up and she carries them over to none other than Mrs. Merriweather and offers her a cookie. And then she says, if they can be a lady at a time like this, so could I. Scout has learned a very important lesson about what being a true woman, lady, is about. Being a true woman is about kindness, compassion, about loving others, and it's about strength. Even in times where things seem so overwhelming, women have to be strong to get through those things. And those women go out there and they are strong and they put on a good face. The show must go on. And Scout says, if they could do it, so could I.